Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. My name is Rustam Ertuğaltınay. I'm a visiting scholar at KHAS University in the Faculty of Communication. And I'm also the principal investigator of the project Staging National Abjection, Theater and Politics in Turkey and its Diasporas. This is the fourth of our webinar series this fall semester, and we are very happy to be hosting Dr. Bahar Akpınar. Our broader project is funded by a starting grant from the European Research Council, and we are very grateful for the generous support of the European Commission, as well as KHAS University, our host institution. Our moderator tonight is Şeyda Yıldırım. Şeyda is a master's student in the Communication Studies program at KHAS University. She primarily works on the representation of Armenians and Armenian historiography in Turkish theater, as well as other fields, including her recently published essay on Simon Stevenson's play Pornography in Text and Performance Quarterly. Tonight, our moderator will be Şeyda again, and I'll now leave the floor to her. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Ertuğ, and hello everyone. Welcome to the first edition of our KHAS ERC Performance and Politics webinar series. I want to remind you all that this meeting will be recorded and you will be able to watch it on our YouTube channel. My name is Şeyda Yıldırım, and I'm a researcher here at the ERC-funded project Staging National Abjection, Theater and Politics in Turkey and its Diasporas. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for this week's presentation and introduce our speaker, Bahar Akpınar. Here at Staging National Abjection, we are grateful to our kind host, KHAS University and European Commission for their generous support. In this webinar, first, Bahar Akpınar will make her presentation titled Theater to Survive by Jewish Inmates in Terezin, Theresienstadt, Concentration Camp and Ghetto. Then I will open this webinar for questions from the audience. And before we start, I would like to remind you all that if you would like to be notified of our future events, you can follow Staging National Abjection on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube through the handles that you see on the screen, or you can leave your email address in the chat. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Bahar Akpınar started her career in the corporate life, then she moved on to academic study in the Department of Playwriting and Dramaturgy at 9 Eylül University. She completed her master's degree at the University of Glasgow. While working as an adjunct lecturer in the Performing Arts Department at 9 Eylül University, she continued her PhD on theater plays written by Jewish inmates in the Theresienstadt and completed her PhD in January 2021. Dr. Akpınar also completed her MA in Holocaust Studies at the Royal Holloway University of London in 2021. In addition to her various academic and artistic awards, her plays were published in the USA and her book on Henry Gibson was published in Turkey. She is a writer for Shalom newspaper. Bahar Akpınar, the floor is yours.
You are unmute. Could you make yourself mute?
We still cannot hear you.
Because now?
Yeah, right now we can hear.
Thank you very much, Şeyda. Now I have to share my screen, I guess, right? All right. Hello, everyone, and merhaba. Thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure to present my paper in the ERC Staging Abjection webinar. I want to thank the organization committee, KHAS University, and Şeyda Yıldırım for her kind support during preparation of today's webinar. While preparing this presentation, I want to start briefly on the Holocaust history and then take you to the Terezin or Theresienstadt in German. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies established more than 44,000 camps and other incarceration sites, including ghettos. The perpetrator used these sites for a range of purposes, including forced labor, detention of people thought to be enemies of the state, and for the mass murder. Terezin is one of them. The Holocaust differs from other genocides in the history. It was carried out systematically and with effective mechanical design by Nazis. In the Holocaust, an easy death is not offered to the Jews. It is aimed that they die in agony and in great pain. The term Holocaust was first used towards the end of the 1950s by a Holocaust survivor, writer, academician, and Nobel Prize winner, Elie Wiesel. It comes from the Greek word holocaustos, which means the complete burning of the destruction of a whole. So please consider the following 3 slides as a silent commemoration for the victims of the Holocaust. Thank you. Let us continue with a quote from Elie Wiesel. Wiesel says, "Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe." From now on of this presentation, Terezin is the center of our universe. Terezin, which is established as a garrison town in 18th century, began to be used as a transit labor camp and ghetto by the Nazis 80 years ago today. Although the Nazis referred to Terezin as a model ghetto, nearly one of every 4 people confined in the camp died there. The pre-war population of Terezin was about 7,000, both soldiers and civilians. After it was converted into the camp, it housed between 50 and 60,000 people. They lived under the constant threat of transport to the east. Most of the Terezin prisoners were eventually transported to the east, which is Auschwitz. Few returned. Terezin is the best known for the Nazi propaganda film of the International Red Cross visit, cultural life, and children. Many educated Jews were inmates of Terezin. Unlike other camps, Terezin's detainees include scholars, philosophers, scientists, visual artists, and musicians of all types, some of whom has achieved international renown, and many of these contributed to the camp's cultural life. We call the art created in Terezin as an art of resistance. Now we go into the details of it. In Holocaust Encyclopedia, created by the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, the spiritual resistance refers to attempts by individuals to maintain their humanity, personal integrity, and sense of civilization in the face of Nazi attempts to dehumanize and degrade them. During the Holocaust, there were many types of resistance. Apart from the armed resistance, there were many examples of unarmed, cultural, or spiritual resistance. The creation of schools in the ghettos, writing songs, preparing musical activities, drawings, paintings, keeping diaries, and maintaining religious custom helped Jewish people grapple with the physical terror they were living with on a daily basis. After the Nazi planned the Terezin as a model ghetto, they provided some artists with a pen and paper and pencils and asked them to sketch the daily life in the ghetto. However, they wanted these drawings to be depicted as the life was normal. Many painters painted real life as a reaction of when they returned to their night in the barracks. KHAS and Friedrich Britta were two of them. In this slide, you can see the one is ordered by the Nazi, the other is done by the artist. And this slide, which is 100 Britta's, the ordered one, you can see the table empty, but the tickets on there, as if they were living in as of waiting for a drink or something, and that you see the musicians behind. However, the artist paint the real world as in the right. Between 1941 and 1945, 1,500 children were sent to Terezin. Only 150 of them survived. But the Terezin children left behind a unique legacy. Practically, we have 4,050 drawings done by the Terezin children. When it comes to music, Terezin is quite vivid music life. The Czech composer Raphael Schechter created one of the most important examples of the resistance through art. In 1943, he conducted the massive and complex Requiem by Verdi before audiences of the other prisoners, SS officers, and German army staff members, adjusting the emphasis in the wording. They shouted them from the stage to the face of the Nazis that they will be punished when the day has come. And when it comes to theater in Terezin, thanks to Dr. Lisa Peschel's brilliant doctoral study, today we know that Jewish inmates of Terezin secretly wrote and performed theater plays between 1941 and 1944. 5 of them written in Czech and 6 of them in German. Dr. Peschel collected, gathered, and translated the play text into the English, together with the biographies of the authors. By looking at the relationship between time, place, and the memory in my PhD dissertation, I aim to take her brilliant work one step further. Although Terezin plays may seem small in number, they have reaching potential for dramaturgical research. When we look at the theater genre, we see diverse variety. 5 of them are in dramatic form, 2 of them are puppet plays, and 3 of them are cabaret. The time-place design of the plays are also quite diverse. There are 4 different grounds. In the first group, we have plays passing in the past time and past life places. In the second group, we have plays happening in the future after the war, where places belong to the past life. In the third group, we came across with the plays using imaginary or fantastic time and place design. And finally, in the fourth group, we have a play, only one, using actual time and places, which is Theresienstadt. When we combine this time and place design with the memory, the picture gets deeper. Theater plays happening in the past generally carry the atmosphere of the good old days to the scene. These texts re-establish the life destroyed by the Nazis within the concentration camp walls by activating the collective memory. However, in this place having future time and place, there is a hopeful atmosphere since the war is over. All the difficulties and the dangers of today now belongs to the collective memory at that time and remembered as nostalgia. This remembering is neither tragic nor sad. Theresienstadt is always remembered with a smile by telling comic memories. When When we come to the imaginary time and place settlement, we observe both collective and cultural memory. For example, in Primspel, we have a fantasy world where Prim celebration, which is a Jewish fest, are happening. On the other hand, in The Smoke of Home, the author takes us to the 30 Years' War and set the Theresienstadt reality into that atmosphere. The only Terezin play taking place in actual time and place is The Insult. It happened in a Jewish quarter of the concentration camp. Although the author realistically portrayed the physical condition of the ghetto, he arranged the play as comedy. So, how does theater increase the spiritual resistance? The use of collective memory and re-establishment of the past life in Terezin means a rejection of Nazi power. The Jewish inmates recreate their identity and their past life as a confronting action to the dehumanization. This response entirely fits Paul Connerton's description of the form of remembering. Drawing attention to the importance of the power in reconstruction of the past, Connerton states that the first goal of a totalitarian regime is to destroy the collective memory. For Connerton, remembering the past is an unarmed defense against oppressive authorities. At this point, having an existential relationship between the memory and theater, we turn into the At this point, having an existential relationship with the memory, theater becomes a performative area of the memory. Herbert Blau reveals the vital connection between theater and memory in these three sentences. According to Blau, theater is where the memory is. Theater aims to create we over I when there is no we left. And finally, the collective memory is the tool of this creative process. When we read Connerton and Blau's ideas together, we see that the theater is a tool to increase the spiritual resistance by recreating the identity and life of the dehumanized person through the collective memory. So, how does theater maintain or increase this spiritual resistance? In the realm of Terezin plays, this question takes us to an area that has not defined before. To describe this empty field, I put forward the concept of counter-catharsis. But before we look to this notion, let us briefly recall Aristotle's concept of catharsis as a reference point. As you all know, according to Aristotle, catharsis is an emotional state that aimed audience have at the end of a tragedy. But briefly saying, the tragedy is aesthetically designed to have the catharsis in the end. In this design, we have a tragic hero from noble class who makes a tragic mistake against the authority. This historic action undertakes him or her to a state of rebellion motivated by excessive self-confidence or ethical responsibility. At the end of a tragedy, a projection is experienced over the audience feelings, motivated fear and pity. The important thing here is that the audience is watching the story of a tragic hero from a distance. And in the end, the spectators comply with the authority so that the destruction they saw on the stage would not happen in their own life. In other words, catharsis prevents individual rebellion by keeping the audience away from the excessive self-confidence and makes them individuals compatible with the authority. However, in Terezin plays, we see the opposite of this situation. When the real life turns into a tragedy, The theater plays were designed to survive, not for aesthetic concerns. In these settings, there is no tragic hero, no tragic mistakes, and no tragic distance. Counter-catharsis, likewise catharsis, uses collective memory. But what is remembered here is a real life itself rather than myths and stories. Counter-catharsis appears most clearly in the play called The Radio Show. The play consists of 17 episodes that contain broadcasts of a radio station on different topics, such as Exercise with Us, Agricultural Radio, News Hour, Radio Hour for Industry, Business and Trade, a selection of folk songs, fairy tales, sport broadcasts, and etc. The songs are sung together, and everyone does exercise as if they were in their own homes they left behind. In these settings, each spectator is also a performer. Counter-catharsis occurs in everyone as a result of this collaborative performance. Instead of fear, pity, and purgation, we have uplifting spiritual resistance that arises with joy of life and the feeling of freedom. While performing, they break down the walls of the Theresienstadt in their memory and construct their own life together with their own identity. And in the end, the audience does not become compatible with the authority. On the contrary, they enter into a resistance that defies it. Yes. On the slide, we can see the difference between the catharsis and the counter-catharsis. Basically, which I explain all of them in previous slides, but this is for as a summary. So I want to end my presentation with a short example from the radio show that exemplifies a little bit from the situation. Pidlovsky. We are broadcasting today from a beautiful stadium of the Turin Soccer Club, where today our national team will play in the semi-final against the Italian national team. The weather, unlike the spectator, is as usual in our favor, not a single cloud in the sky. Actually here, the match, which is everybody in that place know that match because in 1933 they already played it. Another excerpt. Prague, you are our paradise on earth, and we, those who love you, always keep our memories of you alive. Your fairy tale beauty, your voice's reminiscence of song of fairies do not go out of our ears. Prague, we are loyal to you, and we will be faithful to do that. And here we have some of Terezin writers. Thank you for the listening.
Thank you so much. Now I want to open this webinar for questions from the audience. You can use the chat function, you just leave your question in the chat or just raise your hand to ask your question directly. It's not important. Okay, the first question is the hardest one. Yeah, we have. Gamze, please.
Okay, thank you, Şeyda. Merhaba, Bahar Hocam. Thank you for
Merhaba.
the great presentation. Thank you very much. I have a question about the counter-catharsis.
No.
The excerpt shows the way, just like you just described, the joy of life, the description of the weather, description of the match, etc. But I'm curious if there's any contradiction, if there's any gray zone in this place. Not only joy of life, but maybe not only resistance. Are there any unclear or more complex points other than joy of life, other than resistance? Actually, my question more about resistance, because we can describe them as resistance, which seems so, but also, are there any points that cannot be easily defined as resistance to the authority, but more complex than that?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this brilliant question. Yes, in this play, the radio show, all the 17 parts of the play, it's just related with the past life, and it is complied just as if happens at that day. I mean, just imagine TRT1 or a BBC for a radio channel that you used to listen, and in this radio, in this particular play, all the lines, even all the words come from the collective memory in the past life places, and not a single clue of the Terezin. They just imagine that they are not in the Terezin, they are in the Prague, or they are pre-war times, they are in the beautiful days, good old days, they are living good old days in their memory. But in other places, in other play texts, so we have 12 play texts. Actually, one of them we know the concept, but we don't have the text, and the other one is probably written before the Theresienstadt, but we have 10 solid play texts, and we have not in everyone, we have not counter catharsis in every one of that, because they use the crucial point is that the link of the collective memory and increasing spiritual resistance, that direct link and the collective participation of the performance is these are the crucial points. But we cannot come across not in every Terezin place. The others also increase the spiritual resistance, but not in this way.
I see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Again.
We have another question from Ihan.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I have actually two questions. The first one is about the aesthetics of the place. Like, I was curious, like whether you can more elaborate on the aesthetics that maybe like make this performances in a different way. So maybe we can understand them, or we can maybe analyze them in a different way. If we think about the like aesthetic concerns, whether they had those or not, whether it's just for, let's say, like comedic purposes, just for like forgetting the conditions on the concentration camps, was it about it, or was there a concern for like aesthetic beauty within the place? That's the first question. And my second question is about spiritual resistance. As far as I remember, you like showed on the like table, there were like both plays based on reality and just imaginary, the fantasy, like based on past and collective memory. So about your maybe formulation about spiritual resistance, do you think that that is happening in the outside world by disconnecting oneself from the concentration camps? Because that would be another case of resistance. Like, is there an example where we think of a resistance by actually being in the present moment and challenging it? Because when we think about spiritual resistance and living in an imaginary world, as if we are not as if they are not in concentration camps, then that means something else. So maybe if you can elaborate on, to summarize my question, first one, the aesthetics of the place, and the second one, how do you understand spiritual resistance when it's cut from the reality of the time?
Please remind me your questions. Okay.
Okay.
First of all, when it comes to the aesthetics, okay, I put forward that they designed the place not in the aesthetic purposes. For example, as a playwright, when I take my pen and start to think about a play, of course, I have some aesthetic concerns. But I couldn't say that the Terezin plays are not designed aesthetically, that they are aesthetically poor. No, on the contrary, they are aesthetically very, very good plays, solid plays. But the writers vary. For example, there is a 14 years old boy, Hans Hachenberg, wrote a play called Looking for Spectre. It's a fantasy world. He only wrote just one play in his life, and he perished in Auschwitz at the age of 40. But aesthetically beautiful. But when you look at the plays, when you look at the text, dramaturgically, you see that he just twists the situations in the ghetto and the world of the realm of the Nazi to a dark comedy, and he mocks with the Nazis. For example, this is one of the example, and for example, they didn't actually think themselves they are not in the Theresienstadt, not anymore. In the radio show, we have this, okay, let's put this play aside. For the other plays, we see the pieces of Theresienstadt in for example, a cold room, or food shortage, or Nazi slaves. I mean, it comes to the it enters very organically, the Theresienstadt, or enters very organically to the other to the place world. And I don't know it's the answer, and I forget your question, I think.
That was great. This second question was about the spiritual resistance and how it's when it's kind of,
yeah. For example, sorry, I understand. I remember. For example, in the place happening in the future, they remember Theresienstadt. They are in the Theresienstadt at that precise moment, but they remember Theresienstadt as a nostalgia. But all the time they laugh. Not in a single tragedical line. They even remember their own place. They remember outside. Do you remember how we played that play? In the barracks, they say, okay, what was the name of the girl in that role? That kind of questions. But they try to remember as if Theresienstadt there, they have a good time there. And this is a kind of increasing spiritual resistance that you can. So when we look at the survivors' testimony, they report that after the theater plays, or they just think that way. Okay, we will go and remember this place as like this. They try to make the life more easy, and they know that there was a hope. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have another question in the chat, and I will read it. Verena Arndt asks, could you tell us something more about the insult, as it seems surprising that it is a comedy even though it is set in the real time and place?
Of course, I can. Thank you for the question. You know, in Theresienstadt is a model, as I said, as a model ghetto, and Nazi gives some permission to the Jews. There is a community, how can I say, community chiefs, which is we call elder Jews, and they just Nazi give them permission to create a, court for the minor crimes, for example, robbery, for example, this kind of things. The Jews use this court in this kind of purposes. But in this play, the insult, the whole name of the play is a little bit long. The insult of the man with the corruptive memory. Now there is a witness, but that witness couldn't remember the event and couldn't tell the event properly. But each time he adds something to the story, but this story becomes much more comic with the time. But at the same time, because of that corrupted memory, while the events becomes comic, we have all the physical atmosphere in the ghetto. For example, we learned that there is no water in the toilet. We learned that there is no heating. We learned that that people couldn't eat something 2 or 3 or 4 days. Or we learned that the potato is something like a treasure in the concentration camp. We learned that specific information, but the plot is just above that minor realities. So this is that kind of play. It is very short play, by the way. It is just 3 or 4 pages, but we get the idea.
And we have another question, but I think you have already responded that, but also I will ask again. Şehnaz Şişmanoğlu asks, thank you very much, Bahar Hocam. Were there also performances in the other concentration camps, such as Auschwitz?
Sorry. Now you're hearing me. Okay. No, we don't have any. It is not. I say automatically no, but we have done anything. Theresienstadt, since it is model ghetto, and the inmates and the Theresienstadt comes from the intellectual Jews. It is just becomes, for example, it is like a conservatory. They immediately start to create art. One of the survivors told me that she reminds that in the 3rd day in the ghetto, they are doing some music nights, and they try to remember the play text. For this reason, the only cultural life we can survive, or we have the evidences, comes from the Terezin. But we know that there is a woman orchestra in Auschwitz, where there is another orchestra, but they can do music, but we don't have that pieces of art. And at the same time, that concentrations camp, for example, Auschwitz is a termination camp, the mass murder camp. the Terezin, which is also a train station. And during the 3.5 years, approximately 1,040 people deported to the Auschwitz. They come and go. It's like a transfer camp, at the same time a labor camp. As another effect, Hitler wants to use Terezin as a model ghetto, because at that time there's a Red Cross. There's a Red Cross questioning the Nazi camps whether the Jews treated well or not, and they want to make an inspection. And Hitler knew that it will be on Sunday. And in 1944, a Red Cross inspection done to the Theresienstadt, but before that, there's a beautification works begun in the ghetto. For example, they just dye all the buildings. They give the name. They just give the name as if as a normal city. They sent the very prisoner in bad condition immediately to the Auschwitz, and they just left the newly arrived Jews, which looks healthy. Even there's a film you can find in YouTube as well. It's called Hitler's Gift to the Jews, Theresienstadt. It's a propaganda film. It's I mean, I can say that when I first showed that film at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., I said, I can go there. It's like a spa. It's like a spa village. You can hide yourself till the end of the war, but it is not a reality. And Nazi just give the permission to them to make art, to show the art to the inspectors as well. For example, when the Red Cross inspection occurs in the camp, there will be 2 concerts. Raphael Schechter plays. Raphael Schechter and his chorus give the concert of Requiem, Verdi's Requiem. There was a children opera called Brinebar, and they just they saw the people around working happily. I mean, cultivating making agriculture, or going to the cafe after the work, or painting or doing sculpture. It's a really Hollywood style set creation in the concentration camp. It is really worth watching if you like to see. That's why Terezin is apart from any other concentration camps and ghettos. We have only Terezin.
And we have another question from Desire Haq. Desire asks, could you tell us about the opera Brinebar? I find it interesting that it seems like an analogy to victory over the Nazis. You have to unmute yourself first.
Thank you. Okay, Brinebar is actually performed just before entering to the Terezin. Hans Kresse done this opera for the Prague orphanage, and they just performed there. But when they come to the Terezin, they start to do performances. Can I read the question one more? Sorry. Actually, it's it depends what kind of analogy victory you are mentioning, because I know I read several articles and several testimonies that Nazi officer finds Brinebar really interesting, and they loved to watch over and over again. And in some point, one of the Nazi officers says that that boy was much more better in the last performances. However, it was not that boy, because that boy perished in Auschwitz. It is a new boy, and he might be sent in Auschwitz in a short time. So it depends when you look at it. I didn't take Brinebar in my dissertation. I only look at the theater plays. And since I know that it is written before the entering to the Theresienstadt, it is out of my scope, but it is brilliant piece of work.
If there is no question, I can also ask something. This is a broader question and elaboration about collective memory and its role in theater. So you have mentioned Herbert Blau's ideas of the analogy between theater and memory. And in this, I want to elaborate on this theoretical approach that is taken by Herbert Blau, Marvin Carson, Joseph Roach, and their shared concept of haunting or ghosting in other terms. And it seems to me that thinking about collective memory in theater as a progressive and subversive act of resistance also bring different problems, because this is the case of my case studies. That is why I'm thinking about the setbacks of this approach as well. Because so Marvin Carson and different in this theoretical approach, theater is referred to as a memory machine because stories are not only told, they are retold and reenacted. And this can be, how can I say it? This can be, as you show us brilliantly, a resistive act, but this can be also an ideological approach staged by the politically conservative or even fascistic regimes. So I want to just ask you that how can we situate the repressive and ideologically conservative narratives that also evoke memory and utilize it in their own terms, and maybe within the same pattern of these progressive narratives? What might be the difference, or what might be the similarities between different, the aims of the plays and their endpoints in terms of their utilization of memory and maybe in their dramaturgies? So this is just a broader question about the role of theater and memory.
Could you repeat your last word, please?
Last word or last sentence?
Last sentences.
Okay, I was just thinking about, before your presentation as well, I was writing my own article, and I was thinking about the role of memory in theater. And it seems to me like when we approach these types of progressive or resistance, as you say it, spiritual resistance works, we sometimes disregard other narratives that also utilize memory and in most of the time similar manners in theater. And but those works are not called resistive, or they are mostly utilizing certain ideological points of view, and most of the time, sometimes they are regressive rather than progressive, and sometimes they evoke more oppression rather than progressive politics. So I was just wondering about your position in terms of that.
Yes, Marvin Carson takes the term from Ibsen places, the ghostly memory. He says, every Ibsen plays reminds me, you can give one name to every Ibsen plays, and I'm agree with it. So you have to make a connection. I mean, when we call up to memory, we have to talk about the people who make this art. For example, if you are, I'm talking about the Jewish inmates in a Nazi concentration camp, and I'm talking about the precise, their unique memory, and they are linked to it is linked to the Jewish culture in various senses. But for example, when it comes to the Armenian, we come to the great silence. So how can you define that silent part of the memory? How can you express that? How can you take the resistance out of that silence or out of that undefined memory? You know, it is I think it is just although I accept the existential link with the theater and the memory, which is well defined by Blow and any other theoreticians. I think that there is a crucial point regarding to the who are these people and whose memory we are talking about. This is the point.
Yeah, it's also my point. I am agreeing with you in this regard. We have a technical question from Verena, is your dissertation already published, and is it available in English?
Thank you. I hope I will. I newly defended my dissertation in January, and it will be published in Turkey. Hopefully, if I could find a sponsor in the economic situation in Turkey right now. I'm not hopeful, but who knows? It will be someday, and it will be in English. Maybe it could be, the English version could be published before Turkish version because of the reality you all know. And I translated all the Terezin plays into Turkish, and I will publish them with a separate work. And there are lots of cabaret songs and the play text together with the biographies of the author. So I try to create this area in Turkish. And I hope it could be a reference point to the other ethnicities, other theater ethnicities like Armenian theater, Kurdish theater, and it could be a reference point. I mean, and my other aim is to work a little bit more gender, because my first dissertation on the undergraduate dissertation comes from the gender studies. So I want to reread this place in this sense, but I don't know when. I hope.
This sounds very good, actually. It will be very useful for Turkish audiences as well. Do we have any other question from the audience? I think no.
Thank you very much.
And also,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.